Good news, AAA. I found a tire shop. Yeah. So just send, you don't have to send the tow truck anymore. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. This isn't a tire shop at all. What is this? I mean, there's tires on the wall, but there's beer. You know what? I don't think I need AAA at all. I'm just gonna stay here. I'm here with Eric Garcia of All Seasons Brewing. How are you doing today, Eric?
Excellent. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm here to check out what you have accomplished at this old Firestone building.
Yeah, if you want to take a quick pan around of the space. This building was built in 1937. It's a historic landmark, so we had to make sure that everything was intact or as intact as possible. And yeah, this was an old Firestone tire building. Very cool space, nice, wide open, supposed to be a dining hall. You know, of course, with the pandemic, that's kind of put on hold until a couple weeks from now. But when you come around, we'll show you a nice big open space. We're gonna have communal tables, very much like a beer hall, like bringing the community together.
Fantastic. Now, you said this is a historical landmark, so I imagine the permits and the construction was fairly easy to do?
No.
What did that entail?
So we first acquired the building. Pouring with Heart is our parent company. We acquired the building in 2016.
Okay.
So this project has been going for 5 years already, and we didn't open until January of 2021, doing to-go because of the situation with the lockdown. We wanted to open up proper, like we were just doing to-go, kind of building some interest, and then when we could have people on site in February, then we brought them in, and you know, we've been open since February 23rd, I believe.
Excellent.
So yeah, this was a long time coming. You know, there's a lot of things we had to do. So I'm just like trying to get the silo just right to fit underneath the patio, the awning, and just making sure that we're in compliance with all the needs of the building, of the space. So
Yes.
that's why it took so long to
Now, do you
get
have,
this up and running.
similar to food inspectors, do you have historical inspectors come by, swiping a white glove, or is there anything that you could possibly violate where they would go, get out?
Yeah, I mean, like there's certain things you can't like just knock down a wall or anything like that. Like this mezzanine is all brand new. In fact, like this wall right here is brand new. The wall and that second story structure is brand new. This part right here definitely.
The showroom.
Yeah, the showroom has a second story, but like that's always been kind of like more of an attic. Like we install like HVAC and stuff like that. So like all these things we had to make sure were in alignment with keeping it preserved. Another space where we had to take that in consideration was the brew house itself. You know, we couldn't just punch straight up through the ceiling.
Yeah.
We had to angle the vent stacks to go to already open spaces to be able to have the flue for the kettle venting out in an existing space. All right, so this is the grain room. We're in the process of getting our silo finished up and put online.
So you mean to tell me the silo is not just there for decoration?
It is not there just for decoration.
I'm shocked.
Yeah, it will be in full use. We'll be using raw premium pills to fill it. That's the base fermentable we use here at the brewery. Primarily because of the fact doing a lot of lagers, but you know, just as an all-around IPA base, a pale ale base, you know, it's perfect for all that. So, you know, West Coast style IPA these days, you know, mine is it's pills and a bag of pale wheat, so it's very, very light, and then I riff on that and do other tricks like adding a little carafa to make it look like a classic West Coast IPA without needing to use crystal malt.
So what I'm hearing is that you build a base on just 2 grains, and then you tweak it from there. You're not really just going all crazy with 1 grain and then just 6 different types of hops.
I mean, yeah, I try to do some blending because the variations from different hops. So yeah, there's definitely going to be some variation there, usually 3 to 4 different hops in an IPA. But grain-wise, yes, I definitely believe in simplicity. Our pneumatic, which is it's essentially a Schwarzbier, but on the menu it's called black lager. I don't want to have to explain what a Schwarzbier is to somebody or like have that whole confusion.
Meanwhile, actor Ben Schwartz walks in the room. Hey, it's named after me.
So Schwarzbier, black lager, has only 3 malts in it. So I'm a big proponent of just keep it simple. I want the ingredients to speak for themselves and
Definitely.
not become like just this muddled mess of like a soup, like too much stuff going on there. It's complicated. So going forward, once we get that silo online, it'll be filled with raw premium pills. So this room will be primarily for character malt storage. Also, we have a lot of our cocktail fixins. We're a very unique brew pub from the standpoint of we have a hard liquor license. It's a Type 75 brew pub license, so which allows us to serve hard alcohol with the caveat that we cannot self-distribute. So we can, and actually up until last year, beginning of 2020, we couldn't even do, actually beginning of 2019, we couldn't even do to go.
Okay.
Like we couldn't do crowlers, we
Yeah.
couldn't do cans, we couldn't do anything to go. Everything had to be consumed on the premises, and then if we were distributing, we had to go through a distributor to make that happen. But
Liquor licenses.
yeah, ABC laws changed 2019, and so now we're able to sell to go. So that's pretty cool. I mean, that enabled us, especially, I had beer in the tanks starting in November. Second lockdown happened. It's like, okay, now we need to shift gears because we weren't originally even planning on doing to go, but in our specific case. But yeah, now we're doing it. So we're doing cans, 12-ounce cans to go. And
Fantastic.
you just got to roll with the punches, and it's like
Right? At this
all right.
point, in this day and age, that's exactly what you got to do.
Yeah. So, anyway, so yeah, the roundabout reason that we weren't we're a unique brew pub is that we have a Type 75. We can do hard alcohol, caters to everybody in the neighborhood. If you go to the Bevmo, people definitely like their cocktails. But if you still look at the P mix, if you look at the sales reports, beer is definitely still like a 3-to-1 sales.
Definitely.
So,
Now, do you have anybody that comes in here specifically for hard liquor? They just hate the beer, but they like the atmosphere?
yeah, for sure. I mean, we also have, we partner with Chica's Tacos, so people can come in and get like margaritas and tacos. So,
Very cool.
margaritas, tacos, burritos, a lot of different Mexican kind of fusion flair stuff that they serve over there. So, yeah, we do have people who just come in to eat, or they come in to get a margarita, or we have 5 draft cocktails from actually 4 draft cocktails and a ginger beer. We have cider on tap too. We get from Honest Abe, but we have a Collins, we have a Paloma, we have a margarita, and then the other one. What is the other one? Actually, we have 2 different kind of Collins. So, yeah, so it's 2 Collins and then two tequila based or mezcal and a tequila based cocktail.
I will no longer be
very
drinking
cool.
mezcal, so don't even offer me. I will remove all clothing and just start running down the boulevard, and it will not end well for anybody.
We're going streaking.
I'm going streaking.
So yeah, so this is where the process starts. Mill, grist case, bottom of the mill goes into the brew house, and I'll show you that in a second. But
Now-
you need to mill the grain because
I was going to say, now, as head brewer, do you have people doing this for you, or do you still lift these grain bags over your shoulder and do it yourself?
at this moment it is just me.
Wow.
So, hopefully, I mean, we're seeing our our depletions increase week on week. So once June 15th hits, bam, we're open for business. People will be at 100% occupancy expected, unless something weird happens. But 100% occupancy, and then we expect things to really take off because we still have a line. Like we'll have a line on a Friday or Saturday night because of the limited capacity that we can have. So once we can get more bodies in here, I expect that those depletions to go up. I mean, you have time limits on the tables, all that stuff. There's some restrictions. So once that's lifted, then we should be good to go. So I would anticipate by the end of the year, I'll need some help. Like I bring in help for canning days. So that's definitely not a one-man operation, but all the milling, the brewing, cleaning, the cellaring, all that stuff is done by me.
Dear Lord. All right. Well,
Yeah.
this brew house is calling my name. I could just smell it right now. Unless you want to finish anything else on here?
Yeah, I mean, so again, this is where you mill the grain. I'll explain why you need to mill the grain in a second.
My God, that is glorious. So this is where the magic happens.
This is where the magic happens. This is where it actually starts. So this is the brew house here at Imperial Western. Right here you have the mash tun, and you have the hot liquor tank. And then once we come around, I'll show you the kettle. So like I said, there's an auger that comes off the bottom of that grist case. You can see it comes through the wall, up, over, and drops down into the mash tun. So I don't know if you want to take a look inside the mash tun, but
I'm doing
it's pretty standard Premier stainless 15-barrel brew house. The kettle is direct fire, and then the hot liquor tank is heated using electrical heating elements. So that brings me to my next point. Mash tun. This is where the process starts.
Yes.
You got to crush the grains to be able to give the hot water that you're going to mix with the grains access to the interior of the grains, the endosperm, to be able to hydrate it and allow you to extract the wort, which is the barley sugar, the barley juice, if you will, from the grain itself. So as that grain comes through the auger and drops through this little contraption here, it's called a grist hydrator. It's getting sprayed with really, really, really hot water. We're talking about 160 to 166 degrees water. And the combination of the two will bring the mash, the combination, basically a porridge of grain. It'll bring that temperature down to between 148 and 154 degrees or so. And that's going to control our fermentability of the finished product. Fermentability being how many simple sugars are created so the yeast will have an easier time eating it. You know, when you have complex sugars, the yeast won't be able to finish it. That higher temperature will result in that kind of a more chewy kind of body or sugar content. Lower, say if like you're making like a German Pils, you want to mash in about 148, make it nice and crisp and dry, less sugar. So
Now, I've experienced some beers being very yeasty. What do you think happens there?
very yeasty.
Yeah, so I've experienced some beers, and I'm talking breweries that I've been to thousands of times, where like one batch, and I'm like, was this intentional? Did you intend it to have this sharp flavor towards the end? I'm getting a very yeasty flavor.
I guess a question is, so by yeasty, what do you mean? Usually in the aftertaste, I get like the bitterness.
Yeah. I'm talking like there's no, like normally with an IPA,
Yeah.
there's bitterness there, but it's
Yeah.
a good bitterness.
Yeah.
This one has like no hop flavor, mostly like grain, and I say yeasty because it almost tastes like I'm drinking straight yeast.
Okay.
Like White Lab put out a beer, just didn't put
Okay.
anything in it.
I mean, if you have something like that, I'd say that's more of like a technical flaw.
Okay.
Yeah, you should be able to get some yeast character out of the beer. So
Yeah.
like say again going back to like a Helles, for instance, you know, it should be very subdued as far as the yeast is concerned. Yeast character is concerned. Like esters should be minimal. You should have no phenolics. The malt and the hops should be able to speak. And you should get like more of like a doughy kind of yeast character. Like that's like when I think about when you say yeasty, it's like it should not smell like you're proofing bread yeast.
That's what it smells like to me.
Yeah, it should get like
with a hint of hops.
Yeah, you should have like more of like a little bit of like a doughiness, but like more than that, it's I'd say that's more of a flaw.
Okay, so
like I mean, other characteristics like
something could have taken place in between.
Well, just cellaring. I mean, just depending on their processes. So say if like they just rush through the process, like they rush the beer from grain to glass, and it's like a week, and then they haven't let it mature properly, then yeah, you could end up with too much residual yeast in there.
Or a glycol chiller going down for.
Yeah, I mean, so that's I guess the question is like, what is exactly yeasty? Like, say if you're talking about a Hefeweizen is definitely going to be very expressive as far as yeast. I mean, it's going to express the banana, it's going to express the clove, depending on temperature. Higher temperature, it's going to have more of that banana character because the ester is going to be more prominent, more yeast activity. They're going to be a little bit more stressed. So as far as yeasty, I mean, it's just different kinds of yeast have different kinds of expression. Like, I mean, US-05 or the Chico strain, the 001, you know, that's going to be a lot cleaner. That's going to also allow, it's an ale strain, that's going to allow more of the hops and the malt to shine. If you have a British strains tend to be a little bit more characterful. So that's why, you know, you see a lot of times in like the hazy IPAs, they're using British strains to be a little bit more fruity to complement those hops.
Which I'm not enjoying.
Yeah, you know, there are some people who do it well. There are some brewers who don't. Yeah. And you know, I definitely can appreciate the artistry behind trying to make it, but I'm not a big fan of the like low carb. It looks like fruit juice. Yeah. Like I like still that carbonation tickle.
Absolutely.
And you know, you can coax some really cool flavors out of the hops, but you know, if like when you're done with it and there's silty bits, like there is actually yeast or is hop particulate at the bottom of this thing, at the bottom of your glass.
The sediment.
Nope. Like that's when you get like that hop burn.
Yeah.
That's kind of, that's not my jam.
Yeah.
So it can be done well, but there are a lot of people out there who just jumping on the trend and not making it very well and just rushing it through the process.
Agreed.
There's also times where it's just like way too sweet to me.
Yeah. No, I agree. I liked them better when they were Jamba Juice.
Yeah. Yeah. But hey, you know what? I'm all for people experimenting. Okay, you know, the fact of the matter is that hazy IPAs do exist, and people do get excited about it. And if it means that people get excited about hazy IPAs, they come into the brewery and they go, well, let me try something else. And then they go, ooh, that's really good. If it brings more people into the bar and to like learn more about craft beer, I'm all for it. Like IPAs and pale ales are definitely a gateway. I mean, whip beer or Hefeweizen, definitely a gateway. Blonde ales, anything that gets people excited about beer, I'm all for it.
Very true.
You know, it only benefits our industry as a whole if people are excited about the beer. So if you have the haze bros coming in, it's fine. Yeah. They still help pay my paycheck. And you know, you got to cater to a lot of people. You know, various shades. Like our tap list is very diverse. We have everything from a Baltic Porter to hazy double IPA. So excellent. There's classic American Pils. Going back to the history of the building, I want our flagship beer, All Season Pilsner, is a classic American Pils. It's a corn adjunct Pilsner that it's kind of like a throwback to when this building was actually made. So 1937, classic American Pils. So try to pay homage to various aspects of the building.
Definitely. And then the other thing, I gotta, just looking at all the nooks and crannies in this little thing right here, and the spray ball. Now, is this an easy thing to clean?
I mean, you gotta, so after you get all the wort out of this, and send it over to the kettle, and you have a whole bunch of spent grain. Luckily, I have a brew house that has a plow, so it's like you can push the grain out of the mash tun instead of having to manually take everything out. So I started my career at Eagle Rock Brewery, and we had the OG AleSmith Brew House, which is dairy tanks. And there's no plow in a dairy tank. You're talking about like a big bathtub. And the process of grading out there was digging with the shovel and putting it into bins like this on a pallet and then wheeling those out. So it was a lot of like stooping over and then shoveling out, and just a lot more intense work. Like this, I can have grained out in like 15, 20 minutes. So depending on the beer, that is.
Yeah.
Yeah, so as far as the cleaning is concerned, you get all the grain out and then pose it down as much as you can. You know, sometimes grain gets caught under, or like kind of like silty bits, protein, husky bits get caught under the plates. You got to make sure you hose down the plates really well to help break that up. But what's cool about this is incorporated into the brew house, you have many pumps, and you can do a CIP set rinse. So clean in place, you can do a clean in place cycle on this tank. Basically any tank in this building has a spray ball in it.
Wow.
So that's how they all get cleaned, using a pump, and the tank is the reservoir itself with cleaning solution.
Well, these have definitely come a long way since I've ever brewed. So this is the control panel, huh?
Yes, right here is a control panel. Can do many things from up here. It's basically like the command center of the entire brew house. Can control my multiple pumps, hot liquor tank pump, the Grant pump for the mash tun, and then the wort pump, which is eventually going to send the wort over to the fermenters. And again, very importantly, you know, temperatures, measurements. There's temperature probes in each 3 of the vessels, which in turn are hooked up to, say, like the burner on the kettle. As soon as the contactor is about 8 barrels, once the wort level is about 8 barrels, the contactor allows the burner to kick on, and then it kicks on. So like if you turn it on now, nothing happens, but once it hits 8, then it'll kick on the burner.
It's got its own, it's got to have a certain amount before it turns on.
Exactly. It's to prevent you from burning out the bottom of the kettle on accident. Because you can wire it, you can kind of fiddle with it to make it fire without. And aside from that, you know, it's you have the controls to be able to send hot water out to the brew house, cold water to the rest of the cellar, hot water out to the cellar, and then hot water to the mash tun itself, be it through the grist hydrator or the sparge arm. You can also refill from here, and last but not least, when you're knocking out, sending wort to the fermenters, you gotta send it through a heat exchanger to cool it down so you can actually pitch the yeast, and you can also control that from up here.
This is the most impressive control panel I've seen so far.
Well, thank you.
We do a lot of the small breweries, and one has like, we've seen one where there's like one button here, one button there, and that was it.
Yeah, I feel pretty lucky. Like this is, when you have something like this, like it's designed for brewing, it's so much easier than when it's not.
You said you started at Eagle Rock.
Yes.
Prior to Eagle Rock, what were you doing? I mean, were you home brewing? Were you studying? Did you go to one of the
Yeah, so so back in 2005 or so, 2004, I've been drinking beer for a long time. I mean, when I was not supposed to, when I was in high school.
One of my favorite questions is, when was the first legal drink you ever had? And every time I say legal drink, everybody goes, wait, what? I go, when you were 21, they go, oh, I've been drinking beer. I go, that's my point.
Actually, so I remember my 21st birthday, I was drinking Guinness and Bass.
I think I was drinking the same. The black and tans, right?
Yeah, and then the first keg I ever bought was a sixtel of Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. So
it sounds like we're the same age. We're following the same trends,
So when I moved back to Santa Clarita, I was going to school at UCSB. I moved back to Santa Clarita, and I was exposed to a local brew pub. And I remember sitting there looking at the tanks. I'm like, I bet you could do that at home. Like, I bet you could brew at home. Like, and I just started doing research and finally bought some books and finally pulled the trigger. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna try this out. So 2006 is when beginning of 2006 is when I first started homebrewing. Bought some kit, and first beer I made was kind of like an homage to Newcastle, like a nut brown ale. And I just started homebrewing a lot, reading more and more. Eventually, I stepped it up to all grain, and when I brewed all grain with a buddy of mine, I was like, all right, this is it. This is what I want to do for a living. And so, but I wanted to do it, like I was thinking, okay, like most homebrewers, like, okay, I'm going to start saving up money. And, but I thought, the thing I should do is actually sign up for classes and like get a proper education, because I tried to go down to San Diego. My girlfriend at the time was going to law school, and so I was trying to get down there, and I was working finance. Like I was working for Princess Cruises. I worked for Mellon Bank, and I was just like sitting at a desk job. And like I knew that this was not for me, and so I spent a lot of time listening to the Brewing Network, and then I was like, I was really enthused. I tried.
Where are those reports, Garcia? I'm sorry.
Yeah. So I was trying to get jobs down in San Diego in 2008, and I'm like, they're like, well, do you have any brewing experience? Do you have any education? Do you like? And it was just the barrier was very high for me to try to get in there, even just like doing like keg washing and just like doing anything. And so all the breweries I went to, I think at least I went to like 15, and it was like, nope. Have you thought about going to school? And so I figured, okay, the thing I got to do is go to school. And so I ended up signing up for the American Brewers Guild, but it was a year and a half out. So I just figured, I'll just keep homebrewing. I'll, keep tinkering with that and wait till I can go. Eventually, I signed up for it, and a year and a half later, I was in the program.
It finally happened.
Yeah, it finally happened.
Yeah.
In the meantime, January 2010, I started volunteering at Eagle Rock. So, I think I started helping out on batch number 4, just helping out in the brew house. And, my day job was pretty cool because I had every other Monday off, and every other Monday I would go to Eagle Rock to go help them. And so that's how I got my feet wet. And then, like I said, just kept homebrewing. Eventually went to brewing school. Once I was done with brewing school, I had an apprenticeship with a brewery up in Oregon, in Portland. And then when I came back, that's when I started working at Eagle Rock as a brewer. And within 2 months, I was the head brewer and then eventually the brewmaster of Eagle Rock Brewery. And I was there for about 7 years. And then I came over here I came over to the Pouring with Heart family specifically to run this brewery, but because of,
all this going
on, trying to get this place started up, I ended up doing more helping with the original brewery, Arts District, and then our second build out, as you can see here, Imperial Western. That opened in August of 2018. So I spent more of my time at those breweries. Finally, we were supposed to open this space in March of 2020, but pandemic happened. So,
Pandemic.
Yeah. But hey, we're here now making beer. People are enjoying it. It's nice to see the space full. It was very odd to see people inside the first time. But yeah, it's been very cool to finally see this come to fruition, the project come to fruition.
It does. I mean, just looking at the architecture and everything set up, I can't wait to come in here on a regular day and have some beer. But let's take us through. So you got the grain in here. Once you're done with the grain, spent the grain, then how does it travel over to the hot liquor tank?
Well, it actually travels to the kettle.
Oh, kettle,
so
right over here.
Hot liquor tank is actually just a big hot water heater.
Okay, that's right.
So in brewing, you need hot water from everything for the actual wort production to cleaning the tanks. Everything needs hot water.
So does this stay hot all the time?
Yeah, so again, There's another contactor in here. Make sure that it doesn't go below the heating elements. It's connected to the switch right here, and it'll kick on when it's below 180, or it's at 178, then it'll kick on. So this is constantly held at 180. And there's about 45 barrels of hot water in here at all times. Good point to bring up now is that our water, so in brewing, water is called liquor. This is an old-timey, there's like a lot of throwback terms that are either German, British in origin, so like Vorlauf and Sparge and Lauterton, that's German in origin. So our water is it's kind of like moderate hardness, but we run it, so two-step process. We run it through the charcoal filter to remove any chlorine, chloramines. If you allow those to go through the entire brewing process, you're gonna have beer that tastes like Band-Aids. Don't want that. So once it goes through the charcoal filter, I can send it directly into the hot liquor tank, or during knockout, it'll go straight through the heat exchanger. The hot water, the water will absorb heat from the wort as the wort is cooled and sent to the fermenter, and then that water comes into the hot liquor tank. But when I'm filling the hot liquor tank outside of that, it's actually going through a water softener and then an RO filter. So it is stripping the water of its calcium, magnesium, and bicarbonates. So the water that's going in there, and just like a regular hot liquor tank fill, it ends up basically like diluting our mineral content in half. So it's pretty nice. So like it frees you up to brew a lot of the lighter styles, so like Pilsner, Helles, without having too much residual mineral content in there. And then you can doctor the water from there. So even at that, I still have to use, say, lactic acid to get the mash pH right for our classic American pills. And then in the case of, say, like IPAs, or say something like a Helles, or like I want to build a little bit more roundness in the malt character, like say I would add calcium chloride. IPAs, I'll add gypsum. So like that's the other lever you need to kind of like dial, is a sulfate to chloride ratio.
Using RO water, I'm like,
you also have to add back calcium.
Add back into stuff, okay.
Yeah, so like calcium is necessary from also a mash pH standpoint. It helps precipitate more protein out of the mash, just so that you get clear wort into the kettle. Same thing, it goes into the fermenter. Yeast need the calcium for nutrition. So
if I was home brewing, what chemicals would you recommend if I'm using RO water? Like say a 5-gallon batch homebrew, I'm using RO water. I've got nothing in it. I'm a beginner. This is my first time brewing.
Okay.
And I want to go, instead of starting small, I want to go straight IPA.
Okay.
Okay. I got to add some gypsum.
You'd have to add some gypsum, and very, very handy thing. Like you need to, say if you're not using RO water and you're just using your base water,
okay,
you should get it tested. I mean, you can buy water testing kits. They're like $100, and like the Lamont Brew Lab is pretty good. So you need to know what you're starting with.
Okay.
I mean, there's a very comprehensive book. I mean, John Palmer is the man. Like he wrote How to Brew. That was one of the first books that I ever bought for brewing, and does a fantastic job. You can get it as simple or technical as you want, but in the most recent iteration, he really went into water. So like, I think like water for the beginning home brewer is probably like the last thing you really need to worry about. So you can still make the beer, just make sure it's charcoal filtered. Okay. Like drop the chlorine out of there. You don't want to necessarily brew with straight up RO water because it's going to throw off your mash.
There's going to be nothing in there.
Yeah, there's no mineral content.
Yeah.
So yes, in the case of an IPA, you would want to add some gypsum in there. But I wouldn't recommend going straight up RO water to start. Like if you're doing, say like if you want to make a Czech pills, Yeah, and then add some gypsum, kind of like build back some of the mineral. But you need some of those minerals for like calcium. You need like calcium for actual like brewing processes. So a good resource, like there's like a whole bunch of software out there. Like you could use Beersmith, you could use Beer Tools, you could use spreadsheets that are out there like Brew and Water or the John Palmer water spreadsheet. There's a lot of handy stuff out there. Oh, and the reason I brought up John Palmer is he literally wrote the Brewers Association or Brewers Publications book on water. So he's put a lot of work into understanding water and trying to advance that aspect. And I think that has helped a lot of breweries improve in the last 5-6 years. And again, it's like if you haven't gone to brewing school, like water chemistry is one of those things that you go over. It's a very important part of the education. So like immediately when I was going through my education, going through my brewing textbooks, it was like I was bringing these things to Eagle Rock like immediately. It's like, oh, hey, maybe we should try doing this. Maybe we should try doing that. Maybe we should try doing this. And eventually the mash pHs were getting like where they should and things were improving. So,
and they weren't like, I get it, Garcia, you went to school.
Yeah. So, sorry about that. I was touching the mic. I was like, it was kind of itchy. So, yeah, it's a very important thing as far as professional brewing is concerned and just brewing in general is concerned. But when you're first starting out, it is like the last thing you need to even worry about.
Don't even worry about
it. Like the first things you need to worry about when you're home brewing is cleanliness and yeast health and yeast temperature, yeast or fermentation temperature. You want to take care of your yeast. And if you're fermenting a lager, it definitely should be at 50 degrees. You should pitch enough yeast. That's the way that once you get your fermentation side and your cleanliness down, then you can like really start tinkering with the recipes and dialing that in. So you need to get your process down before you can really tinker. And then last thing, it's like, okay, take the training wheels off and then you can like really dial in like the water chemistry and get that nailed down. Another thing is too, you can just, I know you may want to brew like IPA or just listen to what your profile is, and you can get a city water report wherever you live. Like your water department will have that. So like for instance here in Los Angeles, our unadulterated water it's like a blend of 4 different sources: Colorado River, Sierra Snowmelt, the groundwater, multiple sources of groundwater. But our water essentially here is geared towards making like say brown ales or porters. So it's like, why not try making those things first? You'll get the mash pH you want and you'll get the most efficient extract. You'll nail those things. And
so you're saying look up the water report and then match that with the best type of beer for that area?
Yeah, I mean that's a good way to start. It's like I'm like everybody first starts out, they're like, oh, I want to brew this. I want to brew a Czech Pils.
Straight from here.
I want to go straight through a Czech Pils, but a Czech Pils is a tricky style to brew because of like most importantly, it's a lager. Yeast health, yeast fermentation temperature is those are like the most important things. But then like your water needs to be right. So unless you have like a full understanding of that, granted, you're still going to make good beer, or you're still going to make beer. It'll be that much better once you get all that water stuff dialed in.
And so how long typically do you have a boil go on for?
So we're mashed in. We start running off to the kettle. That process takes about an hour and a half to take the wort from the mash tun to the kettle. Hour and a half to 2 hours. Once we get this up to a boil, we'll boil for about 75 minutes. And primary reason is that we're using Pilsner malt. Pilsner malt, we want to drive off all the DMS possible, dimethyl sulfide, which in the finished beer can lead to a cooked corn, creamed corn kind of character, just think about Rolling Rock. Rolling Rock is a very distinct cooked corn character. So we get to a boil. Immediately as it starts, we'll add our bittering charge. Later in the boil, we'll add flavoring or aroma additions. IPAs will definitely, I'll go pretty heavy towards the end because that's what we want. We want to get all the aromatic, the essential oils out of the hops. Early additions won't contribute that much weight in essential oils. So kind of like, those are the two main things. You have the bittering potential and you have the essential oil content. So like, you know, a lot has been made of like, say like essential oil diffusers, like you can like, you know, just beauty products and whatnot, essential oils. Like these are literally the aromatics that you can find present in hops. So like say grapefruit, like they taste in Sierra Nevada, that is coming from the hops. So earlier in the boil, that stuff is going to volatilize off. Later in the boil, it has a better chance of staying in. You kind of get more of the pine character in those middle additions, so like 30 minutes to 15 minutes, you'll get more of the pine character. But like if you really want to capture the essence, the essential oil of those hops, you add it, you know, 5 minutes into the boil or at Whirlpool. So I'm a big fan of using 10-minute, 5-minute, and Whirlpool also chilled down Whirlpool. So instead of doing the Whirlpool at 212 right after cutting the boil, I'll chill the wort down. I'll run it through the heat exchanger to drop the temperature down to about 190. By the time it like kind of stabilizes, it'll be a bit mid 180s, and then I'll add my Whirlpool addition then. So like in Bullet, the West Coast IPA, Chop Shop, the other West Coast IPA, the hazy IPAs, I'll add those Whirlpool additions at 185 degrees. So
interesting.
That's a newer technique that's been around for maybe like the last like 5 years or so. I mean, that's the cool thing is that hops have become such an even more important part of the brewing process. Like it's like one of those extra parts of the palate that brewers can use. Like all the cool new varieties that are coming out of Washington and the Southern Hemisphere. It's like you're getting all these cool notes of like peach or pineapple or coconut. And so it's like it's expanding the flavor profiles that you can get out of your beers. So I'm actually really excited. I brewed an American wheat a couple of weeks ago. I'll be transferring it this week. And it's actually with Talus, which is a newer hop. And it was like ruby red grapefruit pretty early on. And it was just a 5-minute addition out of an 11-pound bag. And it was just so aromatic. It was really nice. It's gonna be like a nice springtime, late spring, early summer, just sipper for people who didn't want necessarily too much in the way of hops, but they wanted more of a, like just a classic American wheat. So yeah, later in the boil, that's where you're gonna add your aromatic contributions. And I found that the Whirlpool with the chill temperature has definitely helped. You have to compensate when you're doing that and adjust the front end bittering because you're not going to get as much bittering potential out of the Whirlpool edition if you do it cool versus you do it at 212. Oh, and to explain what Whirlpool is the Brew House pump or the wort pump will take wort off the bottom of the kettle out of the drain, send it back into the kettle through Whirlpool, the Whirlpool, which is it's a tangential opening, it's a tangential port that causes the wort to spin in a whirlpool, and the purpose of that is to take all the protein solids that have broken out that have precipitated out during the course of the boil, all the hop vegetable matter that's present in the wort, all that stuff will spin around, and because of physics, it'll actually end up in a nice little tight compact cone in the bottom of your kettle.
So Eric, this looks like what my nightmares are made of. What is going on over here?
So this is your pipe manifold. So this is the other half of the control system. I mean, it looks daunting, but it's actually one of the more fun parts of going to a new brew house. Is like, where does this go? So from here, you can send water or wort in any combination of ways. So, you know, it's the pipe manifold system that allows us to boil off. So boil off during the mash is the recirculation of the worts to make sure that you're not getting husks or big chunks of endosperm into the kettle. You don't want husks because it's going to cause astringency in the finished beer. But that's what enables us to say do that recirc step. You know, you take wort off the bottom of the mash tun, goes into this grant, goes from the grant back up into the mash tun. But then you have to be able to take that wort and send it over to the kettle. So the valves allow you to do that and just change the flow. Same thing, you know, the wort pump for the kettle side is set up to be able to do that whole whirlpool step. You know, you're taking wort off the bottom and setting it tangentially into the kettle to create the whirlpool. But you're also able to send that wort into the heat exchanger. So you need to be able to do a whole bunch of different things. It makes it so much easier to be able to do it, having this pipe manifold. Also, you know, off the base of this, the hot liquor tank and the cold liquor tank, or not cold liquor tank, but a cold water supply is actually supplied through here. So this is how I'm able to take water to the rest of the cellar via this water supply hose. So it's like, again, it's like once you do this enough, like it just becomes much more second nature. So, you know, I had a lot of fun coming in and okay, cool. Okay, cool, got it. So, and there's other things I've added in here because I have to do some more hard piping, but like I don't want to waste water. So like when I'm doing the heat sanitization of the wort line, you need to make sure that everything from the heat exchanger on, cleanliness is of utmost priority. Again, going back to that homebrew, talking about the most important things in homebrewing, just brewing in general, cleanliness.
Just saying, definitely don't smoke while you're brewing, blowing your nose, and coughing on the spoon when you're about to stir.
Yeah, so with the heat exchanger, you need to heat sanitize it because there's like every other vessel in here, even the kegs, we use peracetic acid. Peracetic acid is a mixture of hydrogen peroxide and acetic acid. That's a perfect sanitizer from this standpoint. However, there's so many nooks and crannies in a heat exchanger that you need to heat sanitize. So like I'll run a loop from the wort pump through the heat exchanger and back into the hot liquor tank. So that's why there's a hose with a valve there hanging off the front. So I'm not wasting water. I'm sending it right back into the hot water tank, the hot liquor tank.
Similar to a keg washer.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just, I mean, like the keg washer, you're using a chemical agent and then you're using peracetic acid.
Yeah.
Larger breweries that have steam on site will use steam to sterilize. You can also steam sterilize a heat exchanger. You just have to have it's a little bit more dangerous, a little bit more permitting that needs to go into if you're using steam.
I'm like, that sounds terrifying.
Yeah, and then I have this other one set up so I can use it's going to start heating up here in the summer, and our groundwater is going to heat up. So this fermenter, for the time being, I'm using it as a cold liquor tank. Water going through there is 40 degrees. That's what enables me to get the combo between that and the glycol. It's a two-stage heat exchanger. Between the glycol and the cold water that's running through here, I can get my lager down to pitching temp at 48 degrees. So it's a really nice luxury to have right now, because we're not ripping through beer, so I can have this, but it's perfect. That's like a perfect situation, especially in the hot months. So that's what enables me to run this back to the hot liquor tank once it goes through the heat exchanger. Or actually, this is what allows me to send it into the heat exchanger, and then it goes into the.
And then typically, how long is the process before it even hits a fermenter?
Okay, so you've whirlpooled, you've let it rest. Then you're taking it from the kettle through the heat exchanger. Cold water is passing through like you can picture like a radiator. On one side of these plates in the heat exchanger, you have hot wort. So by the time on a standard brew, like say a lager, it'll be about 204 degrees coming out of the kettle. One side of the plate you have 204 degree wort. The other side you have cool water, and then eventually, as it progresses, the second stage is glycol from our glycol chiller, and now that's kind of like the trim effect. Like we can knock it down even further with that. So as it comes from the heat exchanger to the fermenter, it takes about 45 minutes to knock out. So knocking out is the process of sending the wort from the kettle through the heat exchanger to the fermenter. At the same time, we're adding oxygen. And the reason that we're doing these two things, number one, yeast is a living organism. If you send that wort directly into a fermenter and you pitch your yeast, you're going to kill them. You don't want to kill your yeast. So for ales, a standard temperature that I use is 68 degrees. That is a proper pitching temperature for my ales. For lagers, I'm trying to get it down to about 48 degrees. That way, my fermentation temperature is about 50. So scratch that on the ales. I actually try to knock out around 65. Our fermentation temperature is about 68. That way it's a nice slow ramp up to their fermentation temperature. It's less stress on the yeast. Less stress, less byproduct, less soft flavors, a cleaner beer. And so the oxygen then is added to, you've boiled this wort, right? So you've driven out all the oxygen that would have been in the wort. You've driven that all off. Well, you have to add it back because the yeast need this to synthesize healthy cell walls so that it's easier for them to diffuse or pass wort sugars into the cell and for them to eat the sugar. So again, the easier you make it on the yeast, the better your beer is going to turn out. Less stress, better beer. The other thing is too, yeast need the oxygen for cell growth. Once, they're going to multiply exponentially when in the presence of oxygen, but once the oxygen is depleted, then it will start doing the actual fermentation where it's going to take in the sugars and excrete CO2, alcohol, and organic acids. It's not going to be, the yeast are not going to be growing as vigorously as they were. They're going to, that's when you've reached maximum cell density. That's when they're going to really start chewing through that sugar.
Do all these fermenters have temperature regulators?
Yes. So each of these tanks, if you look to your right, these are the fermenters, cone bottom. They're all jacketed. So jacketed, insulated. In those jackets, we have glycol. Glycol is running through those. The chiller is outside next to the silo. But each of these have temperature controllers that are hooked up to a control panel that's on the cold box. And that is how we're able to adjust the temperature. So say during the course of fermentation, I set right as I'm pitching, I'm setting the temperature to 68 degrees, knocking out at 65.
So Eric, what is the next step of the process?
All right, so we've sent our wort into the fermenter. As we are transferring the wort into the fermenter, this is where we add the yeast. I kept talking about yeast. This is where the yeast actually go into the tank. So one of the cool things about brewing is that, I mean, you have a living organism creating this awesome beverage, but the fact that you can reuse it from generation to generation. So like your hops, your yeast, or your hops, your malt, your water is pretty much done, it's spent. Yeah. Water becomes the beer. But the yeast you can keep using and using. So it's like, that's how you can have your distinctive house flavor. So the reason that these tanks are shaped the way they are, with the conical bottom, the ones right here again on the right hand side or your left hand side are the fermenters, is that as the yeast finish up their process of eating all the sugar and they start to get tired start to go dormant, start to get lazy, they start to settle out of solution. They kind of like glom together into bigger and bigger, they call them flocks. So this is called flocculation. And so the bigger and bigger clump they are, the heavy they are. So gravity. They all start to settle into the cone of the fermenter. And a couple days after primary fermentation is pretty much done, I mean, you can do it towards the very end of primary fermentation, but at that time you can take yeast off the bottom, harvest it into a keg, and then pitch it to another batch, and then continue the process over and over. So essentially it's like brew 1 week, I can take that yeast again the next week and just take it out while it's still warm, pitch it into the next batch. Warm being, 68, 70 degrees, 72 degrees. Okay. Or in the case of lagers, about 55 at that point, 57. So we've added the yeast. The next thing, so say if you're dry hopping, this is where you're literally taking hop pellets and adding them to the tank through the, in our case, a port up on top. This is the next step in being able to get like hop aroma diffused into, the essential oils diffused into the beer. So typical fermentation for an IPA will be about 5 to 7 days of active primary fermentation. Once that's done, I've been tinkering with different dry hopping techniques. So sometimes I'll cool the beer down to about 60 degrees, and then I'll add, try to get most of the yeast out. Then I'll add dry hops. Other times I'll let it hang out at the fermentation temperature that I was at, and then I'll dry hop then. I'm just trying to work through techniques and to see what am I liking more out of this version or this version. So
now, are you making the same beer 3 separate times with these 3?
So it's like each iteration I'll tinker, I'll try something different, and it's like, it's a scientific method. You have you have to change one variable at a time, because if you change more than one, then it's like you don't know exactly what it is that's contributing that goodness that you're getting, or the lack thereof, like what is it detracting. So so the IPAs are typically about a 2-week process. My lagers will tend to be 3 weeks to 4 weeks. Those, in both cases, around when the beer reaches halfway to terminal gravity, or typically like 6 degrees Plato. That's 6 degrees, 6% sugar by volume. Once it reaches that point, then I allow the beer to free rise to finish out fermentation. So lagers sitting at 50 degrees, I'll allow it to free rise to 55 degrees once it hits 6 degree Plato. The reason being, it allows the yeast to remain at its most active or vigorous, and it'll chomp through all the remaining byproducts of fermentation. So in the case of, say, diacetyl, that movie theater butter popcorn that you don't want in your finished beer, well, during the course of fermentation, there's byproducts created that, even though when you taste the beer in its current state, you may not smell it or taste it, but if you microwave it, or you do a forced diacetyl sample, or you say let it steep in a hot water bath about 170 degrees for 10 minutes, once that, you're kind of forcing those precursors to change into diacetyl, and then when you smell that sample, it'll totally smell like that buttery popcorn character that you do not want. That will manifest itself in the finished product once it oxidizes in, say, like, there's still going to be minimal amounts of oxygen present in a can or bright tank or a keg, but if it oxidizes, it'll show those precursors. The precursors will oxidize and change into the finished diacetyl. Bad. You don't want that.
Yeah.
So this is one way to help ensure that the yeast remain as vigorous as possible to finish out the fermentation, clean up those precursors, and make sure that the beer is matured much more quickly. So like traditional lager brewing, like they'll leave it at 50 and they'll continue to leave it at 50. Like active fermentation will continue for about 14 days, and then they'll slowly reduce the temperature, and then your lager is gonna be sitting there for about 8 weeks to condition. This is a way to kind of, it's called the Narcissus method of speeding up the fermentation, the process.
So this is why most brewers think IPAs are just whatever beers, because it's so easy to brew. I'm hearing lagers a lot harder to brew.
Yeah, I mean, temperature control is really important. Having twice as much healthy yeast, you need that. Just cleanliness in general, getting it down to the proper pitching temperature. There's nowhere to hide in a lager. So like if you create something that has a fermentation flaw, you're gonna taste it. It's gonna be very abundantly clear that there's a fermentation flaw. So we were talking about Russian River earlier off air. Like Vinny has even mentioned the fact that, one thing that he used to do, like the creation of like double IPAs, is like he used to dry hop the hell out of his beers, sometimes to help mask some of those off flavors that would be present. So it's kind of like, well, you won't notice it as much. That's like lagers are like, that's why like if you have like talking to other brewers, they're definitely going to be drawn towards those Czech pills, German pills, or Munich Helles, like those much more delicate, refined beers, because it's very much a artistic endeavor, but it's definitely shows your technical prowess as well. So that's so about 2 weeks for your ales. In our case, I usually crank out the lagers in about 3 to 4 weeks. Once that time comes to turn the tank down, and it's cleared all its tests of the precursors to forced diacetyl. Once it's cleared that, we'll turn the beer down. And so turn the beer down to about 32 degrees, allow it to condition for at least a few days, and that's when we're going to take it from the fermenter and we're going to transfer it into the bright tank. So now at this point, I was talking about oxygen.
Yes.
Once it's coming out of the heat exchanger, we oxygenate. That's the last time we introduce oxygen to the beer, because oxygen is going to cause premature staling of the final product. So these tanks, these are all bright tanks. These are serving tanks in our case. We're pretty lucky here. We have, I don't know if I mentioned before that our brew house is actually 15 barrels. Our finished, I fill it up higher, so our finished kettle volume is about 16.5 barrels. That's roughly, so a barrel is 31 gallons. So we're gonna roughly have about 500 gallons in the kettle. That's gonna have some shrinkage. It's gonna end up here. Ferment, we're gonna have some shrinkage there. When it comes over here, if we're making a lager, we're gonna end up with between 14 and 15. If it's an IPA, it's gonna be typically about 12 to 13 barrels of finished beer. But So these tanks, these are double stacked 15s, and on the end we have 2 30-barrel tanks, so double batch size. Those are for the higher flowing beers, so like our all-season pills we'll do double batches of. But before we even put any beer in there, we need to make sure that these are clean, sanitized, and purged with CO2. So literally just sending CO2 at a slow rate into the carbonation stone. And what that does is oxygen, or CO2 is heavier than oxygen. That CO2 is going to displace the oxygen, and as soon as you smell CO2 coming out the vent, then it's time you're okay, you can go ahead and transfer the beer. All the transfer lines need to be sanitized, clean, sanitized, and purged with CO2. And then once you've ensured all those things, then you can take beer from the fermenter and put it into the bright tank. And you'll notice these arms right here. I mean, if you look inside, it's kind of like an elbow. This is what it's called, a racking arm, and it's what enables you to kind of select where you're taking the beer from. So like if you have dry hops in there, you don't want to take it off the bottom. You want to take it just right above where you start to see hop matter go through. And to prevent hop matter from going into the bright tank, I have an inline strainer that it's just a canister strainer that physically separates the hop material out. So once you have your finished beer in these tanks, well, sorry, one thing I missed. Our beers are 100% vegan. We use Biofine Clear, which is a salicylic acid, and that's how we achieve clarity. So the nice thing is that with these tanks and being a brew pub, we have a little bit more time. So it's like we don't have to rush it through and filter so that's bright immediately after it's transferred. It'll clear up bright within a couple days with the Biofine. The reason I say vegan is that we don't use isinglass, which is the swim bladder of fish. That's a fining agent. Another fining agent that is used is gelatin, and it's literally like horse hooves and or beef parts that help combine with the yeast that remains in suspension, the polyphenols from the hops that remain in suspension, and the protein that remains in suspension. It combines these and makes complexes and settles out. All 3 of those products do the same thing, but 2 of those are not vegetarian or vegan. The Biofine is, so we can probably say that we are friendly to the animal lovers.
I'm glad you brought that up. So every time I see vegan on a bottle, I'm like, of course it's vegan. It's only got 4 ingredients. What are you talking about? So I'm glad you brought that up and clarified. I, however, prefer...
I see what you did there, clarified.
I, however, prefer my beer to run through bone marrow as it's going over to the bright tank.
Luge. The bone luge. Okay, so before I send the beer in there, I'll put the fining agent into the tank. It's a liquid. Continue the purging process, and then once I smell the CO2, everything's purged, then I'll start sending the beer over. And the beer is sent over, I apply head pressure with CO2, so it's pushing CO2 over into pushing CO2 on top of the beer to force it into the other tank. So pressure on the tank.
So you're not using a pump, you're using the actual CO2.
Yeah, so it's a way to minimize oxidation, another way to do it.
Yeah.
So then the beer is carbonated through, inside these tanks is a sintered stainless steel stone. It allows the CO2 to be broken down to smaller and smaller molecules, and then it diffuses into the beer. Yeah. And takes about 6-7 hours to reach carbonation level, and then you have ready to go beer. And you'll notice on these tanks, the tanks have these trunk lines coming off the side. The reason that they're there is these 12 tanks are actually hooked up to 12 faucets at the bar. So just think about these like giant kegs. you're getting the freshest beer
Straight off
these
wow.
tanks and into the bar.
I'm so used to beers being kegged before I drink them.
Yeah, or bottles or cans.
Or bottles and cans, yeah.
So these trunk lines are insulated. They have glycol chilled lines running through there, and then that's how the finished beer gets over there. I have them coming off the side because, like I said, there's going to be this protein, this yeast, this stuff that's going to sediment out of the tank. This way we get the clearest beer quicker.
It's right above the sediment.
Yeah, it's right above the sediment and then good to go. So again, with every single aspect of brewing, as soon as you take the beer out of here, you've got to clean the tank so you can put more beer in. And so that's where you're going to take out whatever spent yeast, spent hops are in there, send it to the drain, give it a good rinse with the pump. I have a mobile cart pump that's right behind Brian here.
This thing right over here?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll just wheel it out so you can see. So this is the mobile pump, and use this to rinse. You got to make sure you vent down the tank, because if you don't vent down the tank and then you send some caustic sodium hydroxide in there to clean the tank, that's what we use to clean soil or proteinaceous bits, you will implode the tank, because when the caustic and the sodium hydroxide combine, you're going to create a vacuum. It's going to precipitate out and create a vacuum, and you're going to have an implosion. Not good.
Have you ever witnessed anything like that?
I have not. I have seen pictures of it on forums, on the Brewers Association forums, MBAA forums, seen it in textbooks. I don't want to be that guy.
Yeah. What's the worst thing you've ever witnessed at a brewery? That, like a mistake, somebody came in, pulled the wrong hose, or spilled beer?
So I've seen people accidentally, when they're getting ready to say clean a bright tank, and there's still a little bit of sediment in there. So I've seen people take the wrong side of the clamp off of on the valve, and there's nothing to stop all that. So it's at high pressure, just shooting out whatever's in the bottom of the tank, creating a mess all over the place. Very important thing is to make sure you're think twice before you undo a clamp or do something. Always run through your process.
So you witness this. Is this how you got the head brewer's position? Because you didn't tell the guy not to before? that guy was head brewer, pulled the wrong one off.
I mean,
now you're head brewer. Is that what happened here?
Sometimes accidents happen. I mean, you see, they don't have, it's not on Instagram anymore, or so there's a worst beer blog. Oh. I always had some funny stuff. Meanwhile, at such and such brewery, it's like somebody's dry hopping, and they did it before, trying to do it very early on in the fermentation process, and it's like, well, the yeast are creating CO2, and once you throw hops in there and you give them more nucleation, the CO2 more nucleation points to kind of burst out a solution, you create a hop volcano. So you'll see stuff like that. Or again, like I said, finished beer in a tank, and somebody removes the wrong valve, and all of a sudden it just starts shooting everywhere.
Shooting everywhere.
So just make sure, always double check what you're undoing. So I have not seen the tank imploded from that, from not venting the CO2. But yeah, you want to make sure you vent the CO2, rinse the tank very, very, very well before proceeding to clean it. Clean it with caustic, and then before every time you fill these tanks, or at least this is our practice, we'll use acid to clear up any beer stone. On the jackets, you'll have a calcium oxalate buildup called beer stone, which can harbor bacteria if you don't take care of it. So if you let these hang out forever and you don't do acid cycles on them, you'll build up scale in there, and that's where funk can happen. So Orval, if you're not familiar, is a Belgian pale ale. It's a Trappist Belgian pale ale that's dosed with Brettanomyces. Well, in the old days, when Jean de Klerk went to Orval and helped them clean up their process, they lost the flavor of Orval because they cleaned the tanks with acid and then removed all the beer scale that was housing the Brettanomyces that created that characteristic funk. So that's why it's important to run your acid cycle on these tanks too.
It's like when Al Bundy lost his ash in his barbecue.
Yeah, you don't need to do it every time, but it's like it's good practice that every single time you take beer out, that way you don't have to keep a schedule of like, oh shoot, okay, this quarter I need to do it again. So
definitely.
And then the last step is sanitizing before you fill it. So peracetic acid, I mentioned that before.
Yes.
You're doing the same process here. Caustic after you're done, you empty the tank, caustic, acid before you fill it, and then peracetic acid before you, after you so you can sanitize it. So as these trunk lines are at the side of the tank, you know, depending on the flow of beer, I'll have to take beer out before the level reaches the side port, because there's still good beer below that. So like that level is about 3 barrels. So we'll easily have an extra 2 barrels below that point. Well, that beer has to be served in the tap room somehow, and I have this set up to rack out a bright tank today. So the remaining beer comes out the bottom of the tank and goes into the kegs. Once that's done, the kegs go into the cold box, and I can clean the tank, and then that is now on draft in the front. So I'll show you the cold box now, and then you can.
But real quick, so is there, if you're saying this is the bottom of the barrel, is there a difference in flavor?
I mean, I make sure to dump off. So like the sediment will have been sitting there long enough to where it's kind of like tacky and sticks to the dish of the cone, or dish of the tank. And so when you first start taking the beer out, yeah, you'll blow out some sediment. Okay. But you'll eventually have super clear beer, and then you just have to pay attention as you get closer to the end that like you have to watch the clarity of what's coming out of the tank. And then once you start to see murks up a little bit, then you cut it, then you're done. So I'll usually have about half a barrel left of sediment in there. So,
I'm just wondering, I'm like, is that going to be supercharged version of whatever beer you're serving versus the...
No, I mean, if anything, like say in the case of an IPA, you're going to get like a little bit like that yeasty bit that's like settles out. It's going to have more residual bitterness. So you might get more of that. It'll have more bite, and I don't want that. So that's why it's like, okay, as soon as I see in the line, see some murkiness, then it's okay, we're done. No more. Yeah. So, all right, and so this is the putting the beer into kegs is the final step of the process. But to be able to put the beer in kegs, again, going back to cleaning, right behind you, you have the keg washer. And right here, you have a collection of dirty kegs from the week. And here you go, you have the cold box. So these were pulled out of the cold box throughout the course of the weekend.
My apologies, all seasons. I came in earlier and I drank half this stuff.
And so here's where that stack of kegs is going to go. It's going to go on tap shortly after we finish this interview. Creep into your prison cell. Hey baby, can you tell I'm not a criminal? Your choice is seminal. I want you to stay true to what's right for you. No matter who or know what will others say. Just find your way and try to stay true. Where you would like
to go. I've got cigarettes and brandy, which could come in handy if you just...
And the moment we've all been waiting for, the beer itself. After all that process, these little tiny cups house what magic takes place. So where are we starting, Eric?
We're going to start with the All-Season Pilsner. It's our flagship beer. It is, as I mentioned earlier, it's a classic American Pils. And I designed this beer primarily as an homage to the beer styles that would have been popular around the time that this building was actually made. So 1937 again. So it's a Pilsner that has more hop character than your contemporary American Pilsners, like say like a Budweiser or Coors. I actually made this more in the vein of like a classic Coors. So it's a corn adjunct based beer, and
it's very aromatic.
Yeah, I'm really happy with this one. It is our bestseller. It's between that and the Cloud Racer, which we'll talk about in a second.
But if you're looking for like a Pacifico, it's not going to be along those lines. So don't come in here thinking this is going to be like Pacifico or Corona.
Yeah, a closer one to that is our Modern, which is the Italian style Pils. So 4.8. This beer is about 5.2%, 13 degrees Plato, or actually 12.6 degrees Plato, and about 30.
I'm loving the feel. I'm loving the bubbles.
Yeah, it's very refreshing, especially on a hot day. It's about 30 IBUs, and then as far as hopping's concerned, it's Hallertau and Mittelfrüh. It's what we're talking about, Hallertau and Mittelfrüh. It's Mittelfrüh and Satz. Hallertau Mittelfrüh is the hop variety. Grain-wise, it's raw premium Pils and flaked corn.
Is that what the aftertaste that I'm getting, that little bite towards the end, is that the corn?
The corn you're getting like in the back of your throat, that's more of like that snappy bitterness from those 30 IBUs.
Okay.
So it's like, again, it's a throwback to a time when American lagers were snappier, like more hop presence than what they are now. But there is like a touch of that corniness in there. So I'm really happy with how this beer turned out, and you know, it's definitely a crusher on a hot day.
Definitely.
So, all right. So here we have Rhodey, which is our American Pale Ale, and it's the homage to Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. And the reason it's called Rhodey is the original name for it was Where the Rubber Meets the Road, which is an old Firestone jingle. You know, Sierra Nevada Pale Ale is definitely a beer that helped start the craft beer revolution here in the United States. So it's where the rubber met the road.
But Firestone sent you a cease and desist.
No, they did not. It was kind of like an interior thing, because it's like, that's a very long name to put on a sticker or for people to pronounce or to. So I just started calling it Rhodey, and then they're like, yeah, let's just call it Rhodey. So I just wanted to stay away from calling it a Rhodey, like as in a road soda kind of idea.
Oh, like a road pop or something like that. Yeah. I immediately thought it had to do with like following the Grateful Dead or something, or working on a hair band. So let's give this a try. So this is homage to Sierra Nevada.
And so this is.
Yep, I taste that.
It's a Centennial and Cascade in the hopping.
This reminds me of when I first had Sierra Nevada. I was like, oh my God, this is great. This is fantastic. And then you overdose on it, and you're like, I can't. No more Sierra Nevada. No more, please. I can't. If I see Sierra Nevada at a part, the old school pale ale, I'm like, I can't. And I remember everybody used to point out too, that's how you know it's real. Look at the sediment in the bottle.
Oh yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah, the bottle conditioned.
Yep.
So this, like, Sierra Nevada has a special place in my heart. So, so this is, it's a 5.5% beer, about 45 IBUs, and then it is, like I said, hopped with Centennial and let's see here. Bittering's done with Columbus. That's the primary bittering hop I use for the ale styles, and then for lager styles, I'll use Pearl. And then grist-wise, it is Pils malt, some light crystal, Simpson's light crystal, a little bit of biscuit, and a little bit of white wheat.
So normally I would say like, oh, this is a good introduction to IPAs, you know, this and that. No, this is straight. Like, you've got to be ready for some bitterness.
Yeah.
You've got to be ready. This isn't a toy around pale ale. This is straight. This is what pale ale should taste like.
Yeah. So pretty happy with that one. Mm-hmm. Do that, and so I think we're on to Bullet.
All right, Bullet.
So
is this named after I think it was an old movie called Bullet?
that it is.
All right.
So
Oh my God.
Bullet is is our West Coast IPA that's supposed to look more like the classic West Coast IPA. So this is what I was
Yes.
talking about earlier. There's no crystal malt in here. The color actually comes from a little dab of Carafa 3, and it's Pilsner malt and a bag of wheat. So hopping wise, it's Equinaut, Simcoe, and Mosaic.
Oh,
and
getting
then
citrus, some grapefruit. Oh, it smells fantastic.
and it definitely leans on that pine character as well.
Oh, this is good.
So this beer clocks in at 7%.
Oh, that's even better.
And it's actually about 50 IBUs.
It's difficult to find a good West Coast IPA nowadays. You know, in my day, they used to be clear, and I see you brought that back.
Yeah.
Good for you. Thank
Well,
you.
wait till the next one.
Thank you so much. Oh, God, West Coast IPAs. I mean, 20 years ago, West Coast IPAs, I remember when they first started coming out, everyone's like, oh, how could you drink that stuff? Ugh. And I was like, put an IV in my arm with that stuff.
Yeah, so this beer, again, it's giving the perception of classic West Coast, but it's like the more contemporary West Coast where it's pretty lean in the malt character. Like there's no chewiness. It's very crisp.
Definitely.
Refreshing.
Definitely.
Snappy
Oh,
in
no,
the bitter. Actually, the bitterness on this is actually 60 IBUs. I misspoke.
I mean, this is, if I was a boxer, I'd be like, spray this in my mouth. That's how refreshing this is. Oh, I can't get enough of this. I'm definitely coming in here for Bullet.
You gotta come in and get the tacos.
Is Chop Shop just as good?
So Chop Shop is, so the reason I call it Chop Shop, it's the stripped down West Coast IPA. So there's no, it's 6.5%. Same kind of general idea with the malt. It's pills and a bag of wheat, but it's a little bit less alcohol, and then 55 IBUs. And then the reason it's called Chop Shop is stripped down. It's a
So you're
stripped
basically
down.
telling me I'm not going to like that one.
I mean, you're definitely gonna like it. I mean, I'll serve you some right now. I'm excited because I was actually going to transfer the freshest batch tomorrow. So this is the very end of the first batch.
End of the first batch, okay.
Very end of the first batch.
Now,
but
did I wreck my palate with Bullet?
no.
Okay.
No. I mean, this one's more aggressive with the pine character. Let me grab another glass real quick.
So I'm kind of worried I wrecked my palate because
Yeah, it's a
I'm
little
not
bit more.
smelling as much.
It's a little bit more aggressive. I mean, this is an older batch, so it's a little bit more muted in the hop aroma and character.
Okay, that would explain it then.
Yeah, the new one is it's tasting really nice. And I've again also tinkering with dry hopping techniques. And this beer is Amarillo, Simcoe, and Idaho 7.
This tastes like the hop additions were added at the 60-minute boil. He's like, how did you know that?
Yeah, so I tinkered with this one. This first go around. I had a 30-minute edition, so like the bitterness is a little bit more raspy. It's a little bit more raspy, and it was a Centennial edition at 30 minutes. I dropped that to 15 minutes, and it's much more smooth, round, kind of.
This one definitely an introductory
That is
to IPAs.
that is
right?
a little bit harsher on the bite.
Yeah. Chop Shop. If you were like, I want an IPA, but I don't want to go that far, that's a good one.
Yeah.
That's a.
Come check out the new one. The new one is going to be.
Now I'm
awesome.
worried.
I'm
Somebody watching this 2 years from now.
That's a fun part about opening a new spot. So this is the second place I've opened, and it's like new beer, getting to refine the process, tweak it, just tinker. Like that's the fun part.
You know, I was worried because I know that All Seasons is a part of a blanket group company with Imperial Western and Arts District, and I was worried what's going to separate yours from the others. And I'm tasting them right now. I'm like, these are definitely your own creation.
Yeah, it's funny. Like when we were doing staff training, like some of the staff were like, "Whoa, you really definitely have your distinct."
Yeah,
your
these
distinct
are very
style.
distinctive.
Yeah, it's like it's just fun to be able to express yourself from a beer standpoint. One thing I did not make mention of, the all-season pills fermented with 3470, the workhorse Weihenstephan lager strain. Bullet and Rhodey are with USO5, so the Chico American Ale strain. This one is Cloud Racer, and this one is more like SO4, British ale style. So this is Cloud Racer. Original name of this beer was Race to the Clouds. It's like kind of like pointing to the Pikes Peak International, which is it's a race that takes place in Denver.
Okay.
But its nickname is Race to the Clouds. So Cloud Racer was the final name, and so this is our take on hazy IPA. It's more leaning into like more Westy.
I was going to say,
it's a little bit more firm in
this doesn't taste like a hazy.
Yeah, it's a little bit more firm in the bitterness than a typical hazy would be. So it's about 45 IBUs. This is also 7%.
This is not bad. So my issue.
Well, thank you.
I'm sorry. So you see a hazy, and immediately I'm like, it's gonna taste like Jamba Juice. It's gonna have that super citrusy, thick flavor that burns your tongue. That I'm like,
I can't stand hop bite, like hop burn like that.
yeah,
so.
I'm like, oh, this is. I'm doing my best not to make any faces while.
Yeah. So.
But no, this is very good.
Oh, thank you.
It's almost like you're a professional.
So hopping in this one is El Dorado. It's El Dorado, Belma, and and some Simcoe.
What I like is that you didn't hide the hops.
Actually, it's Centennial. Centennial's hop in this one.
But no, like I said, you didn't hide the hops. So a lot of times these hazies, like I said, I liken them to Jamba Juice's Cold Buster, which is just straight orange juice ground up, trying to be Orange Julius, but it's not. It's too much. This, you could taste the hops, you could taste all the work that went into this.
Thank you. Yeah, grist-wise, this is, again, raw premium pills, flaked oats and flaked wheat. More flaked wheat than flaked oats. So
Now,
get that nice hazy appearance.
just give me an idea here. Now, do you sit at home like Mozart, drawing up these recipes, or do you just take from what recipe you had and said, now I'm just going to tweak it a little?
So over the pandemic last summer, there was a time like everybody had to shut down. So I was at home for a good chunk of time, and I was like, I'm gonna break out my homebrew gear, and then I just started I was reinvigorated, and like I just went through and like just started tinkering with the whole.
Honey, I swear to God, I didn't waste my life. I'm just gonna keep brewing, and hopefully somebody will.
I was just broke out the homebrewing gear and just started tinkering with all these ideas that I had and I'd been reading about. Had done a lot of research like in the run up to the shutdown, so it's like there were all these things I wanted to try, and then it's like, okay, let's try them, because it's like 5 gallons is a lot easier to do a test than it is on 15 barrels, you know, because I have to sell all this versus 5 gallons. It's like, okay, cool.
And so you're on the phone to one of the homebrew supplies. Listen, I know we're shut down, but Could you leave a 5-pound bag of grain outside the door? I'll gladly pay whatever you.
Well, what's nice is having, access, like I still, can go get grain from friends, and so it's like, it's not that big of a deal.
Okay, I pictured like a paper bag drop, like, give me the grain, give me the grain.
Yeah, I did go out and buy, like, I'm like, ooh, Yakima Valley hops. Let me plug for Yakima Valley hops. Let me go order, like, peruse a website and just order some new fun stuff that I haven't used. So that was pretty cool. But yeah, some of the like Bullet and Chop Shop, a lot of those like base recipes kind of came out of my experimentation over last summer.
You know what? Thank God for the pandemic, because those are some great beers.
And so, yeah, so again, this is distinctly not like your typical hazy IPA. It's more
I would say
leaning
you
towards the West
perfected
Coast.
the hazy IPA.
So I'll pour you a little bit of the Figure 8, which is the double IPA. The
Oh
hazy
no, I'm
double IPA.
terrified now. So my issue with double IPAs is the hops never really comes through.
Or not.
Oh, not, darn it.
Because that's the tank I was racking off, and I already closed the valve.
Darn it.
However, I can pour you, now that we're gonna like completely obliterate our palates, maybe we'll wait for that one and we'll do the pneumatic first.
All right, let's do it.
Because I got a special treat for you, because it's you're gonna be like one of the first people to try the new revamped 5-point harness, which is our regular double IPA.
Do I need to cleanse my palate?
We'll do the. Oh,
Okay.
let's get you some water. How about that?
Remember, when drinking responsibly, it's good to cleanse your palate in between. I can tell these guys change their filters often.
All right, so we keep changing gears here. So we were going to do pneumatic, but first,
I know, this one's just sitting there just waiting.
We'll do Nabi. So Nabi is a Munich Dunkel, but on the board it's an amber lager, because I don't necessarily want the staff to have to explain what's a Dunkel lager or
What's a Munich Dunkel?
Yeah, what's a Munich Dunkel? So amber lager, and it's very much straight up Munich 2, and a little bit of carafa in there.
All right.
And so, like, that is what malt tastes like. Like you crush malt, and that's what it tastes like.
Absolutely. I'm getting a little, like not a sour, but like a.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Well,
Yeah,
like, I don't know how to explain it. There's like that.
there is a malt twang.
Yeah, this is like straight if you gave me a tea bag filled with malt and put it in a cup. This is
Or
also
like
something-
if you're like eating grape nuts.
This is also what you would taste at like an Oktoberfest.
Yeah.
And but actually, this tastes cleaner than what you would taste at an Oktoberfest, which.
I mean, that's what?
Well, what I mean by that is.
Well, thank you.
This doesn't taste like that. It like an Oktoberfest type event. I'm sorry, not an Oktoberfest beer. Oktoberfest type event. I don't want to mention the huge
Yeah,
event that takes place in LA. But maybe clean your lines more often.
Here's a cool thing. Being a Type 75 brew pub instead of a distribution brewery, we're actually able to make all these different beers. So later this week, we'll have our 16th different beer on tap. So, if you I make brewers beers, because it's like these are beers that kind of like fill all the niches for everybody, but like these are beers that I want to drink.
Yeah.
It's like Nabi, pneumatic. These are definitely good food pairing beers for stuff that's at Chica's, like pork tacos or steak. Anything that's like asada or like braised pork. I mean, like that pairs perfectly with the melanoidin character in these kinds of beers.
Yeah.
So that's a nice luxury to have in this kind of environment. And it's like
Definitely.
yeah, the grind of distribution is pretty rough. So this is pretty rad to be able to like, again, tinker and be able to make beers that are they don't all have to be hazy IPAs.
This is true. Do you ever walk over to Chica's and be like, listen, just give me a plate of tacos and I'll go in the back and create a beer for you, okay?
Dang, I didn't think about that.
Note to self.
Note to self. And then the next beer we have is Pneumatic. This is a Schwartz beer. Again, to avoid any confusion or issues with ordering. It's on the board, it's a black lager.
So it's not named after Ben Schwartz, the actor.
No.
Okay, just making sure.
It is made in the vein of like a Kostritzer. So it's a hallmark Schwartz beer from Germany. It is it's Pils, a little bit of Munich, and Carafa 3 to get the color. So it's like it's nice and dark, but it's not really overly roasty.
I was gonna say, I'm like either knobby wrecked my palate, or this is not as offensive as I expected.
Yeah. So silky like cocoa chocolate. And when we first opened, like first beers that were coming out, I was drinking this the most. I was digging this.
Mm.
Yeah.
One of the things I used to love about working at a brewery was, all right, whistle blows, woo, quitting time, and then we start drinking the beer, just left and right. And is that what you do here? You're like, honey, I swear I'm not late.
I'm just working.
I'm working. I have to sample all these beers.
Oh, that's another story altogether. Yeah, I mean, it comes with the territory, but I got a long drive back to South Pass, so I gotta be responsible.
Definitely.
And then, so yeah, that's the Pneumatic. And then, nope, wrong one.
So I love the names are. So you have the Gold Line, Roadie ready to go.
So if you want a quick rundown of all that,
I do want a
all the
quick rundown
names.
of the names. So because 5 Points harness generally means somebody who's been strapped to a bed 5 points.
Oh no.
So, oh, is that not what that means?
Yeah, it's not.
Well, I thought it was a 5150 reference. I was like, wow, you went.
No.
Talk about out of left field.
So in drag racing, 5 point or like race car racing, a 5 point harness is the actual. You know, it's like you have it like that, you have it like that, and then you got it down below your.
Okay, so what are we talking here?
This is the 5 point harness.
Okay.
Oh, we doing
We'll go back. We'll just edit this in. Like I said, we cut a few times so we can add it back in.
Okay. All right, so this is Figure 8. Figure 8 is our hazy double IPA. And the name Figure 8 comes from those demolition style derby races that's a Figure 8 track. And yeah, this is basically Citra and Galaxy.
Citra is one of my favorite hops. And when not used properly, can be a deadly weapon. And
When not used properly,
when
yeah.
not used properly. And see, remember I mentioned earlier about that Jamba Juice flavor?
Uh-huh.
I'm kind of getting that here because Citra's so citrusy.
Oh, like over the top, yeah.
Yeah.
This is definitely this is very orangey to me.
Mm-hmm.
I get like key lime.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm drink the shit out of this.
Oh, I forgot to mention, like the cool thing about the Cloud Racer, like I really wanted to play up like more of like the, like there's like a pineapple character going on there from the El Dorado, but I wanted to play up like the strawberry, like do strawberry pineapple. And so Belma was a very good complement to the El Dorado. So like
When is this happening?
that we already had that.
Oh,
one.
darn! I was.
That one, like if you sniff it, like it really like when it was super fresh, it was like strawberry fruit leather.
Really?
Yeah.
Like, I didn't get so much of a strawberry flavor, but I definitely did get some good notes in there.
Yeah. So if you want, so beer names, all season pills we already went over. Modern. So the architectural style of the building is streamlined modern.
Okay.
So modern is an Italian style pils. It's a contemporary style of pilsner. So it's kind of like it's modern. It's so that's why that's named that. Gold Line is an old It's from the 60s. It's a 60s era brand of Firestone tires that actually had a gold line.
Oh, I thought it was named after the Gold Line in LA.
No, not the gold line
Okay.
itself. Rody, we already talked about. Ready Go just happened to be the beer that I was brewing the day that we opened, that we had people on site. I didn't plan it that way, but like that's the name. It's kind of like a Ready Go, because it's kind of like the way that this place has been for the last 4 years has been like, okay, ready, go, ready, go.
Nope.
Okay,
nope.
now go.
False start.
So, Chop Shop we went over, 5-point harness we just did, figure 8. Das Acid, simple. It's a Berliner Weiss. That's German for the acid. Nabi. So the reason for Nabi, the amber color.
So you're a huge Harry Potter fan. Go on.
The amber color it's more related to like knobby tires, like off-roading tires. So
okay.
like kind of like dirt colored, like clay colored kind of thing, like you're off-roading. Pneumatic, it's a traditional German style. Pneumatic is how you fill your tires, but that's the German spelling for pneumatics.
Do you
Slick.
get people walking in here going, "Can I have pneumatic?"
I have to ask Steph about that one. I haven't heard that one. However, people have come in and said, "Can I get the Kanabi?" People have actually come in and said that.
That's funny.
Let's see here. Slick. It's a Baltic Porter. Baltic Porter. It's a big, dark beer. Slick is a reference to racing slicks.
Yeah.
Checker Flag. Checker Flag stays on. It's named Checker Flag because eventually I want this to be like a real homage to Saison DuPont. The label on the Saison DuPont is checkered. It's a checkered flag. It's a green and white flag. And then, like ideally, I want to do that one with some Brett, like barrel-aged Brett, have a clean version. So we do have some rye whiskey barrels over there in the corner.
I was going to ask you, do you do any barrel-aged stuff?
That's the first of it. I have a friend who has a little project doing some distilling, and some Slick is in those rye whiskey barrels. So yeah, we're gonna do some barrel aging too. The only thing that's tough is that we don't have a forklift on site, nor do we have a stacker, a walkie stacker. So everything has to kind of stay on one level for the time being.
Got it.
Which is fine. Like the grain room, the height is too short. There's nowhere to really put a forklift. So
Now, do you do the cider, or is that a guest cider?
the cider is from Honest Abe. So we should probably put something up there that says Honest Abe cider. Yeah.
I do enjoy Honest Abe. One of my favorite Honest Abe ciders is the Mexican lollipop.
I have not tried that.
Oh, do you remember the Mexican lollipops back in the day?
Yeah.
They're shaped like watermelons, covered in spice.
Yep.
They managed to produce a cider that tastes just like that.
Huh.
It's amazing.
Nice.
It's one of my favorites. It's one of those ones where I'm in the area, I just happen to see them, I stop by, I pick up that one right there. Definitely, I recommend it be a flagship cider.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I believe it's the dry cider.
All right.
All right, so this is the 5-point harness, referring to the restraint system, seatbelt restraint system that you have in race cars, double IPA. And so this is a double IPA that has Nelson and Mosaic are the primary hops, Nelson being more predominant, and then a dab of Simcoe in there. So
Okay.
this is a 9.5% beer, and
You try to kill me?
about 90 IBUs.
I'm going to need
calculated.
5 points to drive home. All right, so real quick, my issue with double IPAs, and it smells great, but my issue with double IPAs is generally you can't taste the hops in a double IPA. You would figure you can because it's double the amount of hops. Now, is it double the amount of hops or just double?
Well, so hopping wise, so pale ale, the roadie that we had earlier, that's 22 pounds, and 22 pounds in that dry hop. My IPAs, I'm doing 44 pounds, and then the double IPA, I'm only doing 66 pounds. I mean, this is super fresh because I transferred this last week. This yielded 11 pounds. And so again, tinkering with dry hopping techniques. This one I dropped it to 60, harvested, then did the first round of dry hops. I did 33 pounds. And then the second time around I went heavier on the Nelson and then did the second 33 pounds a week later. So it was a week on each dose or each charge of dry hops. And like this one compared to the last one is like way ramped up on the hopping. Like I'm pretty happy with it. I'm getting like a lot of like orange pith, like orangey character out of it.
I want to say I hate it because it's a double IPA, but no, this is fantastic. It's not so like I don't want to name names, but a certain brewery.
It's kind of like sticky. Like it's like it has that double IPA character where it's like sticky. It's got some dankness.
Well, no, like there's a specific brewery out of San Francisco, and they have this one IPA, and then they have a double IPA. And the double IPA I didn't like as much as I like the one IPA.
Okay.
So I was like, and I started noticing every time I saw a double IPA, I'm like, I don't know what they're doing. They're increasing the ABV, but the hop is just not there. It's not.
I think the problem with double IPAs is that there's so much more going on. Like as far as the grain bill's bigger, so the alcohol is bigger. There's the yeast character is more present. There's all these other factors going on, and I think things can get muddy pretty easily because then it's just like, oh, just dump a shitload of hops. But it's like, again, it comes to like, just be judicious with your hopping. Like how you like just be careful with how you're doing it. But I agree. A lot of times it's kind of like,
it's like almost like a brute. Like I'm tasting just dryness. I'm not even tasting.
The other thing is too, like sometimes things can be overhopped. It's just like a lot of vegetal character. I mean, that's a pretty common thing I've tasted. Again, it's fun to tinker. So it's like this is the second iteration of this beer, and so I'm already really happy over the second go around of doing this beer compared to the first one. It's like I like the first one, but this one I like even better.
Well, I can tell you right now, Eric, your experience. How many years?
Been brewing professionally for 10 and a half years.
Just the experience shows right here. Clearly, even a mistake, I'm assuming if you made a mistake, you'd learn from it and just build off of that.
Try to. That's a cool thing about brewing just as a profession. It's like, there's science, there's the art to it, being able to go back and like tinker and like fudge things this way or go the other way, and then at the end of the day, trying to make things better and trying to always improve. So like reading and just like researching and trying to learn more. It's like an ongoing process. People are figuring new things out all the time, like how to do things better. And at the end of the day, it's so gratifying to, you finish up your shift and you walk out the tap room and you see a whole bunch of people here drinking your beer. It's like, awesome. I just made something I made something that people are really enjoying, and that's rad. Like it is like a very gratifying job, like a profession.
I couldn't figure out how to describe you. I couldn't figure out if you were an artist that works with beer or if you were the beer doctor. Just because you're so scientific when it comes to this beer, and your attention to detail just shines right through.
Well, I think there's a little OCD in there somewhere.
Well, I just want to thank you so much for inviting us down here, and I definitely recommend everybody come down here. If you love traffic and beer, definitely visit All Season Brewery.
But more so beer.